Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and today I'm going to be talking about one of the nominees for the recent Academy Awards. This is, of course, a Best Animated Picture nominee for 2025. And the 2026 Oscars, but for 2025 movies. It's a French film, and it's honestly one of the better movies that I've seen of the last year. This being Little Amelie, or The Character of Rain. Before we get started, I just want to say, if you're listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to comment, and ring the bell for notifications. Also, if you're on Spotify or just any other podcast site, follow this show on those platforms. So, Little Amelie, or The Character of Rain. This is a movie directed by Malice Baled and Lian Cho Han. I hope I got those names right. These two directed a beautiful animated feature. It's 2D. It looks kind of like, I want to say like watercolor or like pastels. There's like not really like any thick or hard outlines to this. It's just a very nice, very colorful looking movie, and it's just very beautiful to look at. Just to get it out of the way, I've seen all the nominees for this recent animated awards at the Oscars, like the nominees. I saw K-Pop Demon Hunters, great movie. I saw Arco, pretty good movie. Zootopia 2, really good movie. Ilio, don't know how that got in. And now this, which I would honestly say is the best one of the bunch. I expect K-Pop Demon Hunters to be the one that wins, and I would be perfectly fine with that because, one, it's, Sony, who does a lot of great stuff, and they haven't really gotten a whole lot of love outside of Spider-Verse, so, they deserve that. K-Pop Demon Hunters was, of course, a big phenomenon. But if any other animated film were to win, this is the one that I would want to win, because, again, I think it's the best one anyways, but also because it's just a really nice, beautiful, unique movie. I mean, sure, we've gotten a bunch of coming-of-age stories with teens, with young adults, with people that are already in their adulthood, but I don't think we've ever really had one that is focused entirely on a toddler. And that is the main thing about this movie, is that it is entirely focused on little Amelie, who is a 2.5-year-old for most of this movie. She eventually becomes 3, and we're getting it from her perspective. So because she's such a young girl, she thinks everything revolves around her to an extent. She doesn't ever come off self-centered or anything like that, but it is pretty clear that she thinks like, okay, I am God around this world. She pretty much even introduces herself as God. But it's done in a way where it's like, oh, well, she's barely 2.5 years old. Of course she's going to think that everything around her is about her specifically. Like, have you ever been around a toddler? They normally think everything is based around what they think, and that's a really nice hook to get with. It's just a really nice, simple movie. This movie doesn't even crack 80 minutes. It's, I believe, like around 75 minutes with the credits, maybe 77 minutes. And yeah, it does use that time well. Basically, you get to start like from her birth, where she was like a vegetable kid, like she wasn't moving or anything like that, until she finally decides to start moving, and she meets like the most important people in her life, which, yes, it would be her family. She has a mother, father, 2 older siblings, 1 brother, 1 sister, but the ones that matter most to her are her grandma, who essentially starts her journey into being a better person, and the family assistant, Nisho-san, who is essentially she's like, cleaning up the place while the parents are too busy doing stuff, and she starts teaching Amelie a bunch of things around there. For the most part, this is a movie that, I don't want to say it has no plot, but it is very much just like, okay, well, here's like a sequence of her life, and that is plenty for us to dig into, because since she is narrating and since we're getting all these events, we know off the bat, like, okay, she's an unreliable narrator. She, of course, is only explaining things the way she understands it. Because of that, it makes for an interesting thing where, like, early on when she mentions that she was a vegetable child, it makes you think, like, well, was it that she really was a vegetable child, or was it just that that's how she interpreted it, the way she wasn't really moving or anything like that, But yeah, it's a nice story. With the whole movie, it's pretty much taking place in Japan. For the most part, this is a Belgian family that are just living in Japan because the father is a diplomat, is what I believe the movie says at one point. It's, something where, like, it is acknowledged, but we don't really focus on it too much because that's not the point. I know that they mentioned that the mother is like a musician, so they're basically in Japan for a time period. The grandma visits from Belgium and eventually leaves to Belgium, and the movie takes place, from what I remember, it was like late 60s, early 70s. I know they mentioned it at one point, but yeah, I forget if it was like 60s or early 70s. I know it's definitely close enough to World War II, but far away from it that it becomes a bit of a conflict in the movie. I won't go into too much of that, but basically, this Belgian family does have a landlord who is the one that encourages them to hire Nisho-san, and eventually that becomes a whole conflict because of her feelings towards the white man over, well, what happened in World War II in Japan. It doesn't go too deep with it, but it doesn't really need to, because that's not really the whole point. It is something that is, of course, nice to have, and it is, I think, vital to the story because it gives you just a framework to understand why things are the way they are. But for the most part, this is a movie about a little toddler and her experience growing up in the world, and I think that's beautiful. This is a very simple movie for anyone to watch. I don't think that this is a movie that will only satisfy animation fans. I feel like this is a movie that, even if you're just a casual, animation fan, someone who only watches it for like Disney or only watches it when you're around kids, that you will probably enjoy this. And not just because, like, oh, it's 2D and, that'll probably remind you of when you were a kid, especially since now we mostly just get CG features here in the West. But I do think that that factor will help you in easing you into this world. But regardless of it, it's just a really good movie, and it's just fun seeing what a 2-year-old thinks of regarding everything going around. Like, it doesn't try to do and not that I hated this, but it doesn't try to do something like the Lego movie where it does like the cutesy, like, oh, let's do like a super exaggerated world because kids are super exaggerated. Like, it doesn't do like, like Captain Underpants or Dogman where they start imagining certain crazy things. Like, it's always fairly grounded. It's just that everything's explained in a way where, again, because it's a 2-year-old, the way a 2-year-old would understand these things, like, oh, look, there's, at one point they talk about how carps are like the symbol of man. So, she of course is like, oh, well, it makes sense because carps are ugly and stuff like that. Again, it's supposed to be a fun little thing with her. She hates the brother because the brother uses her for different things. Like, at some point it's explained that the brother has sat on her just to read on comics and tends to mess with her a little bit when she's doing things with the sister, which does factor into the story. But you'd think that, they'd go over the top and do like a whole boys versus girls thing. But no, it's just, typical sibling things. And of course, it's like, well, yeah, when you have an older sibling who is a different gender than you, you're bound to feel like you're an outsider to them. But yeah, there's just a lot to like about this movie. I don't want to do like a whole ranking of like, oh, what's the best animated film or what's the worst one of the year, because, I mean, again, well, even if you go back to what I said earlier, you already kind of know what I feel about each of the animated films nominated for the Oscars. And for the most part, I do think that at least 2 of them could have been cut for better movies. One of which I'm a little more lax on, just because I'm like, well, this is a foreign feature. It's not a big thing. So, its staying there is perfectly fine by me. The other one is Ilio. But for the most part, I don't think it really matters in the end because, of course, this is all my opinion. And at the end of the day, I do think that it doesn't really matter in the long run because there are times where certain movies have won the Oscar that I am like, yeah, it's not a movie that I would have said is the best one of that year, but it's like, okay, that one still deserved it for everything that went around it, so that's perfectly fine. There's times where I felt like that about the various Disney wins that happened, where it's like, there was other movies that were better, There were other movies that felt lesser than the winner that should have won just because Disney had already gotten it way too much anyways. Now, none of this is to say that I think that the winner shouldn't be the best one. It's just that sometimes I do feel like it's important for the winner to be something more than just what I think is the best one. Because again, there's a lot of other people in the world. I am not the only person whose opinion matters. So of course, even if I think that Little Amelie is the best animated movie, I know a lot of other people still prefer K-pop Demon Hunters. And I'm not even just talking about people that only saw K-pop Demon Hunters. I'm sure that there's other people who saw this movie too and thought, yeah, K-pop Demon Hunters is still the better one. And for the most part, it's very close for me. These are right, neck and neck. The only reason why this one I feel like is a little stronger is just because the emotional stuff is just a little stronger for me. And then, of course, I just love the animation. But, again, if K-pop Demon Hunters wins, I'm perfectly fine with that. Oh, the animated features is my second favorite of the year anyways. And there's a lot going for it that I'm like, yeah, just from a perspective of, how it would look like when it wins, that would actually be great for that movie. So I can't even be mad if that movie wins. I bring this all up just so I, don't have any people going, well, hey, if you thought this was the better movie, then how come you're, are you mad at the fact that it's not going to win? Which, again, as of this recording, I don't know if it'll win or not. More than likely it won't because K-pop Demon Hunters has been winning everywhere. But in the event that it does win, it's like, okay, well, that's cool. But if it does lose, which is likely, that's cool too. I don't care. What matters is that this movie is seen. And since it's a smaller foreign feature, chances are that a lot of you are probably not going to watch it by the time the Oscars hit. Chances are that you won't even see it within the next year or so unless you look out for it. And I do think that you should look out for it because it is a really good movie that, again, it just shows you like, okay, this is the world through the lens of a toddler, and that's great. I think it's fun. I think it's neat, and it's such a unique thing that you don't really see in a lot of these movies. Normally, when you see a character as a toddler, that's either because they're a side character or if they're the main character. That's only going to be a portion of the movie. And then, you're going to see them as adults. So it's nice to see, like, okay, we're going to actually explore how this feels for this character and how they view the world at this point in their life. And just seeing how that shapes their whole worldview. And just having the whole arc be from, her looking at herself as a god to this world to just looking at herself as a human. Because, of course, by the end, she eventually comes to the conclusion, like, hey, I'm just another person, just like you and me, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't even matter. It's a nice little way to go about the whole story. Again, I just really like that because it's not something you honestly get a lot in movies. I don't know, like if you make about a movie about a character this young, it's usually going to be much more, I don't want to say fantasy, but it's usually going to be more, I also don't want to say nonsensical, but it is going to be like more unrealistic, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you got your Rugrats or your, again, well, granted, this was an older kid, but still, like, with something like the Lego movie where the whole reality around these characters is going to be more heightened. Like, pretty much the way they view things, the way they understand things, it's a lot differently than what a normal kid would see. Which is fine. I do think that that's also a fun approach to do it because, of course, kids have very active imaginations, but it is nice to see one where it's like, this character is fairly grounded. Like, she never thinks that she's creating things that she isn't. And, there are a few moments, I will admit, where it's like, okay, from her perspective, she parts the waters. From her perspective, things are much bigger than they normally are. But again, it still feels grounded enough in a way where it's like, well, this is just a view of a little kid, and just seeing how the world is interacting. And of course, that plays into her, mindset of being God, versus, like in Dogman, where it's like, oh, dogs would have big piles of bones and, cloning machines would have an undo button and stuff like that. Like, like it doesn't go like anywhere where it's too silly or too absurd. Like it still remains fairly consistent in terms of, okay, these are the rules set upon this character's viewpoint, and they still kind of makes sense even if you're an adult. It's just that, of course, as an adult, you probably realize, like, okay, this thing that was incredibly deep and huge for her is not very much so. It's just that because she's only just a few feet tall, of course she's going to see it as this impenetrable size or whatever. It's because of that I really do like what they did with this, because, like, you know, not to go into a whole one versus another, but, you know, the other French animated feature that I saw, Arco, which was, you know, a good movie. With that one, part of the thing that, you know, held it back for me is that early on it kind of feels like this is an animated movie that I've seen, you know, dozens of times. The kid who gets lost after disobeying his parents, and now it's just a matter of, you know, trying to get back to the parents. They do some other stuff that's really cool and really unique, but for the most part, the big setup is that, versus this one where it's like, the setup essentially is a coming of age story, which we've seen lots of, especially in foreign features, but the difference is that they're always, again, older people, so seeing it from someone who's that young makes it very fresh, and seeing the perspective of, like, hey, look, you know, it's grounded, but also kind of unrealistic because it's a kid, but not too unrealistic that it starts to feel like, okay, this is an adult's idea of what a kid is doing, is what makes it so special. For the most part, I just highly recommend it. If you get a chance to watch it, watch it. It is available to stream, at least if you purchase or rent in a lot of places, so that's good. When it gets on physical, which I believe is around March, definitely check it out if you can. Honestly, it's a really good movie, and if you love animation, if you think of yourself as an animation fan, you owe it to yourself to look out for these movies. You can't just be sitting down just looking at whatever is like the DreamWorks or Disney or whatever. And I love those guys, but we need to support these smaller films too. We need to support the foreign films too, because animation is so special that it really needs to be supported beyond just the studio level. With all of that out of the way, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again next time.
And a body, too. What could God do now?
Thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and follow this channel. Subscribe, like, and comment. Ring the bell for notifications. Go ahead and also follow my podcast. And give some love to my Patreon account while you're at it. It's www.patreon.com/psycams. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you come back for more in the future.